Idea of climate, sort of change, and then how that can be manipulated is scary, and it's both scary and it's something that is scary partly because it's so real, yet so many people don't believe in it.
Right.
Welcome to Behind the Pages. Thomas Waite is with us today. Thomas is the founder of a technology consulting firm. He is also on the board of directors of a number of other technology firms. He has written several thrillers, and his most recent one is what he is here to talk about today. This is called The Trident Code, and it's a book that is based on the idea of a master computer hacker taking over a U.S. nuclear submarine and using it to threaten to destroy the Antarctic ice shield, which, if he is successful, will destroy the world as we know it. Welcome, Thomas.
Thank you.
So let's start by having you give us a little bit more detail. Who are these people in the book? Who are your main characters, and where are they as the novel starts?
Okay. Well, as you mentioned, the novel begins with a ruthless cyber attack where hackers take over a U.S. Trident submarine, or at least appear to hack their way into a U.S. Trident class submarine. This is the second novel in my Lana Elkins series. So Lana is a former NSA operative, currently the head of a cybersecurity firm who partners with the government. She did in the first novel, Lethal Code, and in this novel as well. And she is alerted and brought into the Situation Room, so to speak, at the NSA. And they're befuddled because it's not actually possible to hack into a submarine, but it's been apparent that something has gone on. As the novel progresses, they discover that what's actually going on is that some of the sailors on board the craft are gassed and killed, while some still remain. And those folks take over control of the sub, because it does require manual control, and cruise and look for an unusual target. The U.S. government and its allies don't know what that target is, but we can talk about this when we talk about how I came up with the idea. It's a target that is much worse than, for example, detonating a nuclear bomb in New York City. It actually has a much more catastrophic worldwide impact. So the race is on, and Lana and her colleagues work to try to thwart this attack, both in air, literally the cyberspace, as well as what's called kinetic war, which is normal warfare, to pursue the submarine, a race against time. And she ends up partnering with a Russian who she's not sure is really going to work with her, or is working with the enemy to try to thwart the attack.
And we're not going to tell
No,
our
we
listeners either, because that comes later in the book. So the book opens with a scientist named Brian Ahern driving home. He walks into his house, finds that his home is basically under attack. His wife is tied up, his children are tied up in another room, and all of a sudden he's confronted with somebody who is threatening him as well. This is all because he has something. Can you explain what it is that he has?
Yeah, so Brian has been working on a revolutionary technology which is based on real science. It's called ambient carbon capture. So it's a mechanism by which you can extract carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and convert it into power, into literally back into fossil fuels endlessly. So it essentially cleans the environment and then returns the fuels back to the environment for reuse. He's working on that in secret, and as it's laid out in the early stages of the novel, with some help from a unnamed major oil company. And these bad guys come into his home, and they're there to steal the technology for their own purposes, which are revealed later in the novel.
Right. So his concept, or his creation, I should say, is something that could essentially save the planet. But in the wrong hands, what could happen? How could this be used in a negative way?
In the wrong hands, if you have this technology and you're able to gain control of access to fossil fuels, oil, gas, etc., through some things we don't want to talk about quite yet that happen in the novel, then you have control and you can locate those this technology near power-producing areas. And if you own the land or own the resources, you can charge a premium for that so that you can supply the world's energy needs based on your own evil intentions.
And you also, would that affect the climate in any kind of way? I mean, if this were up and running?
It's neutral. So it essentially removes all pollutants from the atmosphere and generates new power in a sort of a closed loop system worldwide.
Okay. Are there any limitations to this? I don't know whether I should call this a machine, or is it sort of picturing it as a giant structure or something? But are there any limitations if this were to actually get created?
So this, as I understand it, I'm not a deep technologist in this area, but as I understand it, this has been prototyped, and the issue is one of scale so far. In my novel, which is set in the near future, roughly 5-8 years out, there have been further advances, and this particular professor has discovered a way to scale the technology to bring it to market successfully. It's yet to be fully developed, and that's why it's stolen at the stage it's stolen in the novel, to be used and then commercially produced and deployed.
So it will mean, if this is ever real in both the novel and in our lifetime, that we will no longer really be dependent on fossil fuels. Is that
That's
right?
right. It's essentially it's a
that?
recycling of them, yes.
Wow.
So I would say probably more correctly, no longer depend on the further extraction.
Okay, right,
Yeah.
right, yeah. So there are actually smaller versions of this that exist now?
There are prototypes that I've read about, some even here, I think, in the realm of MIT, and I think there's been some others developed in other research labs, but no commercial launches of these that I'm aware of.
And one of the problems currently, I think you mentioned in the novel, is that right now they use as much fuel as they produce. So there's a problem with them now that would make them not.
That's part of the scaling problem, to produce vast, larger quantities off a small amount of carbon capture.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So why is this being stolen now as the novel opens? And what do the thieves want?
It's unknown to the reader why. This is the scene you're describing is the prologue, and so you have some very, very bad characters doing horrible things to this family, not far from here, and the reader doesn't know why, except they're learning about this technology. Later in the novel, when the villain, who is Russian, that's not a spoiler, a young Russian villain, not the archetype sort of James Bond style, yes. When he is revealed and his intentions are revealed, plus his accomplice at the time, who thinks this is all a environmental mission that she has signed up for.
Right.
His longer term objective is to not go that route, but to do something very insidious and very damaging to the worldwide environment, and claim dominance through controlling power. The other thing that he does, and his country is doing at the same time, is demanding withdrawal from other nations from the Arctic, the North Pole resources, resource-rich, fuel resource-rich areas.
So it's almost two, I mean, it almost felt like, in the beginning anyway, two separate things going on. This submarine and this device.
Right.
Yeah. Although it turns out, yeah, they have some relationship with each other
Mm-hmm.
as the novel moves on. As you started to mention Lana, who is a very main character in this book, and she owns a cyber security firm. Can you just tell us a little bit about her firm and what it does?
Sure. So Lana is formerly an operative with the NSA,
Okay.
and she still has a very good relationship with the current head of the NSA.
Mm-hmm.
So she is a incredibly bright and very technology savvy
Mm-hmm.
woman. She has left the NSA and started her own firm called Cyber Fortress,
Mm-hmm.
which does cybersecurity and other work for both public and private companies.
Mm-hmm.
However, when in the context of my novels, there's a national crisis for each of the two that have come out so far, and when that happens, the NSA welcomes her back to partner with them,
Mm-hmm.
because she's so brilliant. She's their best operative they've ever
Mm-hmm.
had, to partner with them to try to solve the mysteries of any cyber war that's going on.
Mm-hmm. As the book opens, she kind of arrives at her office, and gets a communication from Robert Holmes, who is the head of NSA, telling her to intercept all communications from ships that are in the Arctic area. If we could ask Lana, how much of a potential problem would she say that these ships are?
In terms of doing that?
National security, like how much of a threat are the Russians? Does she think the Russians would be at this point in the
So
novel?
she's not sure at that point in the novel. So what's going on is there's a lot of tension among the major nations that have laid stake to the Arctic reserves. Famously, a Russian took a submarine underneath and planted a pole and claimed all of the Arctic for Russia. And that's mentioned in the book. What she's tracking is the fact that there are very few American vessels there. America and some of the Navy folks I talked to verified this. Is very far behind on icebreakers in the North Pole, in the Arctic region. And because of that, as the tensions rise around these claims for mineral rights in the Arctic, and as threats are ramping up, particularly most notably from Russia, she does become very concerned because it's a national resource, or at least our share of it.
Right. Her VP in charge of security tells her about the death of Dr. Ahern and his wife. In what way might her firm be involved in investigating this murder?
Probably not at all, because that's usually done by the FBI on site, and in the novel it describes the FBI looking at the scene. However, so her analyst that works with her, whenever he looks at patterns of activities and data flows, which essentially is the flows of information coming from your computer, my computer, or office buildings, meta flows. They track and look at anything that's unusual. So I like to think of her at that stage as trying to put together pieces of a puzzle, and this oddity comes up about this murder, and they start to learn about the technology, and they don't know what it means at first. Later in the novel, as you know, they follow these data streams and discover how there may be a link.
So after hearing about the double murders, then she's asked to join a video conference where she finds out about this nuclear submarine being taken over. That had just happened within, I guess, 13 minutes, and they're immediately called in. Got to watch this.
Yeah.
Is this a typical day for Lana?
No.
Okay.
No. This is one of her worst days.
Yeah.
You know, as a writer of thrillers, obviously in my novels she has a number of bad days, and they're the centerpiece of the novel.
Yeah.
No, I think most of her time is as a single mom. She's a single mom with a 15-year-old daughter, meaning 15 years of age when Trident Code happens. And, you know, she is very busy with her daughter, and she's also very busy with her job. And as I say, since she is a very, very good technology person, she's very hands-on in her work, but she's also the CEO of this company and runs it. So you can imagine on a normal day, she's probably having meetings and doing other things with her team, management team, just like anybody else.
What would her company actually be doing in terms of for national security?
So it would depend on the client. So for companies like, let's say, multinational corporations based in the U.S. who might be a client, her firm would likely be working directly with the information technology group at that company and doing all of their cybersecurity work, threat analysis, threat reporting, attack reporting if someone's hacking into their systems. Building the firewalls is actually not a very sophisticated term, but building the protection that they need in terms of encryption and other things that you have to defend yourself. And probably under contracts with most of these companies in which they do regular work for them as well as when there is an incident. So for example, to take this into the real world, Sony being hacked, a company that I'm aware of, that I know that's in this business, was hired by Sony to help figure out, along with the FBI and the NSA as it escalated, who was responsible. So her day-to-day work would be like that.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
But she also has government contracts. So the NSA has essentially outsourced some work to her because of her talent and her team.
Right. The submarine is taken over partly through hacking, and then we don't know physically who's on site. But is it possible in the real world for this to happen?
Yes. Unfortunately, it is.
Yeah.
So it's important to know that the submarine is not literally cyber hacked and taken control of. You can't do that. If you talk to, as I did, some submarine people, including I talked to a vice admiral and a former, and an admiral, both of whom are now retired, both very active in the sub force, as well as a couple submariners that I talked to as well. There are a lot of physical systems that are required, and there's a number of people that are required, at least a half dozen. Much of this is classified, so they don't go into great detail about it. Right. But if you recall Tom Clancy's movies, Hunt for Red October, which is a very good movie and book about how this works, there are protocols, security protocols. Now, that means it requires a combination, in this case, of cyber, which is largely focused on the communications networks for the sub, and the ancillary satellites, et cetera, and then hands-on in the sub itself. And of course, the reader is reading this and wondering, why are these, how did these people die? The ones that died, how did the ones that didn't die survive, and what are they up to? And as the novel evolves, they wonder why they're doing it. Right,
exactly. The FBI was aware of what Brian Ahern was working on. Was he doing anything illegal?
I don't go into great detail on that in the novel. I don't think he's doing anything technically illegal at this point. I'm sure that there are parties out there, either environmental groups or other oil companies or others, that would not be pleased to hear that he's working on this research privately in partnership with one oil company. And it's left unsaid, but I think it's pretty obvious. And for your viewers, that we're only talking about the prologue, and he doesn't appear again. And that, again, is not a spoiler.
No, but it's very important to the plot.
Yeah. So because of that, there's an inference, I think, that is deliberate, and I'll leave it to the reader to determine, that he wasn't doing everything above board, and that there probably was fair sums of money involved.
Oleg, who, again, this does not give anything away. He's the master hacker, and his girlfriend, Galina, are Russians that living in Moscow. Together, through hacking, they have been able to find out what Brian Ahern was working on, and presumably to figure out a way to steal it. Considering that Brian Ahern had security on his computer, and all of his all of his development that he was working on, how possible would it be for this to really happen?
So the research that Galina and Oleg are doing is largely based on tracking information that ties into his university work, and that really is accessible. I mean, the standard rule of hacking is if it's connected to the internet, it can be hacked. And if it's not connected to the internet, it probably can't be hacked. There are some examples of that. But
well, is there anything that isn't connected to the internet?
sure, it's well, other than people living in the remote areas of Montana in a shed, yes, there's something called air gapping, which is having a computer never ever connected in its entire life since it was built to its being used, never being connected to the internet. And an example of that, it was in Iran, where they were doing the nuclear development program with the centrifuges. There were computers being used to control those systems, and they were not connected to the internet, but they were hacked. And horribly so. So the Israeli and the U.S. government created a malware called Stuxnet, and the way it was introduced was all it takes is one person who doesn't really understand the danger to breach that, that isolation of that unit. So in this case, they used a thumb drive or a USB drive and inserted it. And when you do that, if there's malware on that USB drive, it just takes off and it starts permeating the system, and you can start running and controlling it. So that's what it did, with very bad results for the Iranians.
Right. Galina thinks that what they are doing is for kind of the good of the world, basically, the good of the planet. She really doesn't know anything about Oleg's other plans for what he's planning to do with all of this. If we were to ask Oleg, would he tell us that she wants to know or does not want to know?
Does not want to know. Galina is very smart, very kind, and I don't want to say naive, but innocent, very innocent. And she thinks that they're working with the best intentions. It makes her a little uncomfortable to think even remotely that there's a possibility that they're doing something even slightly askew from that, as you know. So I think Oleg would think not.
Right. He certainly is enough of an egoist.
Yes.
Egotist. I don't think it would really matter to him that much, but I think, she is a very sophisticated hacker, but as you said, she's not sophisticated in other ways.
No.
And she's kind of naive, isn't she?
Yes, she is, although she's very smart. And I think for the reader going through the novel, you see a real arc in her character of developing. So by the end, she's nothing like she is at the beginning of the book, because she's had to go through so much. But no, I think that's true. I think that she is that way. Whereas Oleg, right off the bat, you just do not like this person.
That's right.
Although he's both amusing and despicable at the same time.
Right. Yeah, he is. Yeah. I mean, she's sort of almost like, in a sense of character development in the childlike stage when we meet her. Even though technically she's an adult, and then she learns sort of wisdom, but it turns out she has a lot of strength as well.
Yeah, I think she's actually one of the strongest characters in the novel. And she musters that strength. Again, this is not a spoiler, but she has a daughter who's suffering from leukemia. She's a single mom with a deadbeat husband. Oleg has taken her in his life and his care, and she's grateful to him and believes that he loves her the way she loves him. But once she's betrayed and once she realizes what's really going on, not only for her and her daughter, but for mankind, she really wants to take action. And she takes risks, but risks that are consistent with trying to protect her daughter at the same time.
Right. Oleg has kept certain pieces of information about this machine from her. Thinking he's being, more clever than she is. Is she capable of getting all of the information she wants?
I don't think so, because Oleg's been very careful to parse out that information and literally segment it in a way that she can't discover enough of it and assemble it to understand what's going on. But it's a good question, yeah, because she is talented.
She's very talented. I sort of want to think almost that if she knew there was more out there that she wanted, she would find a way. So
she might.
She might.
Given what she does later, she might.
yeah, exactly. So when the submarine is sabotaged and successfully, and then it's posted immediately on this video on YouTube, this is something that Oleg had paid to have done. How was he able to do this?
So he has a cohort who's working with him, and that person's also extremely adept at technology.
Yeah.
And so if you can intercept video streams through communications, satellite, then it's essentially there's nothing to downloading video and posting it on the internet, whether it's on YouTube or any other forums. Similarly, he deals with other forums to hide secret keys, so to speak, and those have to be encrypted with a key on each end in order to work. So it protects it from, or in one case deviously, he makes it available to the U.S. government to try to throw them off the path.
Absolutely. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself? I mean, you have a background in technology.
Yes.
So how did you use that background to create this plot?
Well, I should say right up front, I'm not a hacker and I'm not a cyber expert. Fortunately, I know people who are, and I talk to them all the time, which informs my novels. Yeah. But my background is sort of accidental in technology. So I went to college, I studied English literature. Creative writing was my favorite class. But like most of my colleagues, had to get a job. And I went to school at University of Wisconsin in Madison, and I came back here and needed to get a job to pay my bills. And just fortuitously, a technology company is the first place I started working. And I started there in the marketing era, so I was a writer initially, and then moved up. And I was fascinated with technology. I just thought it was so interesting because it was changing all the time, and it still is. And I also found, from a career standpoint, that while the technology people I was working with at the time were very smart and had really interesting ideas, they just could not communicate it. They weren't good at, I don't want to say making it easy to understand, I want to say more appropriately, I think the word's accessible, so that lay people like you and I can understand what it is they do and what they're talking about. And it turned out that was a very profitable road for me, personally. I moved my way up in marketing and then went on, as you noted, to start my own technology consulting firm. And so I had a lot of technology clients because they were comfortable with me and I was comfortable with them. I could talk their talk, but I knew how to do a lot of other things that are necessary for a good technology service or product to be successful. So after I built my firm and sold it, I went back to my first love, which was to write. Now, I'd been writing all along, ghost writing for a lot of people and then writing under my own name. But if you go back to some of the things I wrote, like at the Harvard Business Review, for example, I wrote case studies. If you read those today, they're like short stories because that's the way I like to write. And in business, telling a story is just as powerful as it is in literature. So I embarked on writing my first novel, and that was called Terminal Value, and published it myself after getting rejected by everyone. And as a result, it did well, and my career was launched, and I've been writing ever since.
Using some of what you knew could be possible to make it possible in your novels. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time. To our viewers, you've been watching Behind the Pages from the staff of 22 City View. I'm Diane Goshgarian. And thank you.
Thank you.
Such a great, we could have sat here for another hour.
I appreciate your inviting me. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I know. I really appreciated you coming.
Yeah.